Hydrangeas. We all know this plant. Europeans may call this hortensia, and it is one of those classic timeless plants in the garden. It's a long blooming shrub that has flowers that create drama. The showy flower displays persist into fall, and the fall-winter foliage color is exquisite. Also, if you're a gardener who loves blue flowers, most big leaf hydrangeas can satisfy this. The name of hydrangea is from the Greek word that refers to water vessel because of its cup-shaped seed capsules. And most hydrangeas originate from around Asia, like Eastern Asia, areas like Korea, Japan, and China. Also the Himalayas and Taiwan, with the exception of Hydrangea arborescens and quercifolia, which are native to Southeast North America. For today, I wanted to focus on the most popular types for this video. This includes big leaf hydrangeas like mop heads and lace caps, oak leaf hydrangeas, and also climbing ones. So I will be mentioning some favorite varieties later on in this video. Alright, let's get started talking about the plant itself. Hydrangeas are part of the Hydrangeaceae family, and it is ornamental, like I mentioned, a woody plant that is mostly shrub-like in form, with a few that are climbers or clingers. It's mostly deciduous, but can be evergreen. This all depends on the species and the garden's cultural conditions. It grows to be about 4 to 6 feet tall and about 6 feet wide, although the climbing hydrangea grows much larger, limitlessly larger, and there are some dwarf forms of the shrubs as well. Hydrangeas grow pretty fast, growing more than 1 foot in the active season. Generally speaking, the foliage tends to be on the large side, quite broad-leaved, macrophyllous, or is it pronounced macrophylla? I don't know, whatever. Anyway, the big leaf hydrangeas, the paniculatas, and arborescens tend to have apple green color foliage and are smooth and often with a slight gloss, whereas the oak leaf hydrangeas have very deeply lobed foliage. They're darker green in color, and the foliage is kind of fuzzy too. I think most folks know what a hydrangea is, whether they're a gardener or not. The flowers are really memorable. Straight up, they're huge and in your face. They look like big pom-poms. And the colors vary depending on the species and the varieties. There are white ones, some are chartreuse, and a lot of them are shades of pink, blue, and purple. Talking about color, in any given hydrangea, the color shifts. On a single shrub, you may see shades of blue, purple, and also chartreuse. It's quite a visual treat. Although the flowers only come up in spring and summer, they do persist into fall. At that time, they kind of dry up and turn a muddy green to brown color. I know that brown and muddy green part don't sound so attractive, but when it's paired with the fall colors of yellows, oranges, and burgundy, it really gives that seasonal effect. It just looks so seasonal, yeah. Don't know how else to describe it. Just seasonal in a garden that's beginning to slow down for winter. As the name suggests, hydrangea sounds like water, right? Yes, hydrangeas do like water, lots of it. They need regular to high amounts, especially in Northern California. Hydrangeas appreciate consistent watering, that's really key. With less water, the foliage will look tired and may crisp up. I prefer using bubblers versus half-inch tubing when irrigating. I just think that hydrangeas perform better when you actually give them denser amounts of water. When you're planting the hydrangea in the ground, the ideal spot for it would be kind of like a woodland setting under a large tree canopy where there's ample surface water, protection from the sun and wind, lots of organic material, and on the acidic side. Hydrangeas like loamy soil with good drainage, and they perform better in cooler temps. Definitely, if you're in the inland areas of Northern California, it's better to plant hydrangeas on the north side of a building with indirect sunlight, but if you're on the coast with milder temps and exposure like Half Moon Bay, it's totally okay to plant them in full sun. You don't have to worry about hydrangeas dying from frost in most situations. They're so incredibly hardy down to 0 degrees. With that said, they generally grow from zone 5 to zone 9, and the Bay Area is zone 9. Unfortunately, I don't recommend planting hydrangeas in Southern California because you're going to end up using lots of water with lackluster performance. They just won't perform well in SoCal. Hydrangea is a plant that can indicate things in your garden. You can tell what's actually going on with the soil when you look at the color of the flowers. Usually, if the flower is more blue or purplish, that generally means that the soil is more acidic, whereas if the flower is more pink, it's leaning on the alkaline side. Pretty neat thing. You can kind of manipulate the color. If you're really into blue flowers and if the soil is leaning alkaline, you can add some sulfur to acidify it. This will turn the flowers more blue. But to keep it blue, you do have to apply the sulfur every year. Are there any issues with hydrangeas? Not so much, as long as you meet the basic core needs of the plant, which are dappled light, loamy soil, good drainage, and ample water. But yes, there's one slight issue. It will occasionally get powdery mildew. Not so bad though, it's not a big deal. This is a really easy plant to grow and take care of. There isn't really any special care needed. Every year I recommend just applying a good layer of compost. Make sure that the soil has lots of organic material because it needs rich soil. Give it some all-purpose fertilizer or acid fertilizer, whichever you'd like. As far as pruning goes, it really depends on the species and the variety. Some hydrangeas bloom on old wood and some on new wood, and some bloom on both. For the ones that bloom on old wood, there's a short window of time for pruning to ensure flowers for the following year. Prune it back immediately after it blooms. This would be around June, July-ish. But for the hydrangeas that bloom on new wood, you can prune it anytime pretty much. I have to say though that pruning hydrangeas each year is really important. Hydrangea flowers are so large and heavy, and the plant itself grows rapidly in a season. The heavy flowers tend to weigh down the branches. If you prune annually, the branches will be sturdier and will be able to help support the heavy flowers for future blooms to come. In the home garden, hydrangeas are truly a wonderful plant for multiple season interest. You have the spring and summer flowers and then the lovely fall colors. And it works so well with so many garden styles. This could be English style, classic, cottage, and even modern gardens. The shrubs can be planted as hedgerows or can be included in mixed plantings. You can even create a beautiful garden room full of hydrangeas, like at Philoli Garden in Woodside, where there's this hydrangea room. Every time I go visit Philoli, I make it a point to visit the hydrangea room and just take a moment and relax. It's so calming yet breathtaking. Hydrangeas can also be used to instantly brighten up a shady spot in your yard, and it can create a nice ambiance for the evening, particularly with the ones that are white, chartreuse, and powder blue in color. Overall, it just gives this incredible feeling of lushness and drama in the garden. Alright, let's talk about some of the varieties. Here are a few of my favorite ones. For the big leaf, Hydrangea macrophylla, Endless Summer series is a foolproof one. It's been bred to flower on both old and new wood. What this means is you don't have to worry about pruning it. You can prune it anytime and it will still bloom. I also like Hydrangea paniculata limelight. The flowers are pretty, they have a chartreusey color. And Hydrangea arborescens Annabella is another popular variety. They are white pom-poms and they tend to grow smaller, they're not as tall. They also don't have a traditional branch structure. You may need to help it out by adding some supports or stakes to keep the plants up as they're blooming. And for the oak leaf hydrangea, which is Hydrangea quercifolia, Snow Queen is a really reliable, large shrub with exceptional flowers and foliage. It is truly wonderful to see the fall display with the deeply lobed foliage. It grows to be about 5 feet, but there are a couple of dwarf options like Little Bobo and Peewee for smaller gardens. By the way, oak leaf hydrangeas take a little less water than the big leaves, but it's not drought tolerant. Please get that straight. It is not drought tolerant. It still requires regular water, just a little less than the macrophyllas. Finally, for the climbing hydrangeas, the more common one is Hydrangea anomala subspecies petiolaris. Long name. Yeah. It has glossy foliage, the flowers are attractive, and the fall foliage color is what makes it just a delight. Rather than reds, the color is yellow. It's so pretty to see yellow covering a wall. But beware, it clings onto walls. The self-clinging hydrangea is strong, really strong. So probably wouldn't suggest that you plant it against a typical fence is going to cause damage for sure, a brick wall is more suitable. Pairing hydrangeas is pretty easy since it's an attractive plant and quite adaptable. Most woodland plants are compatible with them. Some common ones that work well are loropetalums, camellias, Japanese anemones, azaleas and rhododendrons, dogwood, berberis, geranium, Japanese forest grass, daphne, hellebores, pyrrhus. Pyrrhus is really lovely complement to hydrangeas. Things like that. There are so many options. If you happen to be in the Bay Area and you'd like to see some examples of hydrangea plantings, you can check out the iconic Lombard Street in San Francisco. It's a picturesque hill with switchbacks that are lined with hydrangeas. Quite the photo op. Also, definitely check out Filoli Garden in Woodside, California. They have a lot of tall, mature hydrangeas and that garden room that I mentioned earlier. You can also go to Gamble Garden in Palo Alto, where you can get some good ideas for plant combination. On a final note, I wanted to share an interesting fact about hydrangeas. In Japan and Korea, the foliage of Hydrangea serrata are actually processed and used to make an herbal tea. I personally find this really interesting because my father, who is retired in Korea, has a hobby farm, and on his farm there are many naturally occurring traditional plants like magnolias, and he's had trouble with magnolia flower and leaf poachers. There will be intruders coming through in the middle of the night, pretty much stripping the trees to gather enough material to create herbal teas. It's sad and upsetting, but I also find this really interesting. I've always considered these plants to be purely ornamental, magnolias, hydrangeas, whatever, those traditional plants, something that is of aesthetic quality, but that's how we seem to see them in North America. But in Asia, since there's a strong interest in herbs, tea, medicine, and anything that could possibly be edible and nourishing, this has totally flipped the script on me. Please take this with caution. Hydrangeas are toxic if they're not used correctly. Many plants that are edible are only edible when they go through chemical changes through specific processes. They can otherwise be highly toxic, so please do your own research before consuming any plant. And that's it, friends. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think, and if you'd like more in-depth plant ID videos like this one. Have a good one.